He called him a nice guy who doesn't get it right too often. He publicly humiliated him on live television at a G7 summit. He told the entire world that no one can tell what Donald Trump wants from this war. And then, while Trump was still fuming, Emmanuel Macron picked up the phone and called Iran's president directly. Not to threaten, not to condemn, to negotiate, secretly, quietly, behind Washington's back. And today, the Financial Times published a single sentence that detonated like a bomb inside the Atlantic Alliance. France and Italy have entered into secret negotiations with Iran to ensure the safe passage of their vessels through the Strait of Hormuz. Not through Washington, not through the coalition, directly with the enemy, bilaterally, while American soldiers are still dying. Welcome. Subscribe right now, because what France just did is not a diplomatic disagreement between allies. It is the most consequential fracture in the Western alliance since the Iraq War. And the full story of what Macron is doing, why he is doing it, and what it means for every country watching this conflict unfold is something the mainstream coverage has completely failed to map. Let's go. Let's start with the G7 call, because that is where this rupture became impossible to contain. On March 11th, the leaders of the 7 most powerful Western democracies convened an emergency video summit to discuss the fallout of the Iran war. Trump joined from Washington, Macron from Paris, Schultz from Berlin, Meloni from Rome, Starmer from London. And when it was over, 2 sources with direct knowledge of what was said inside that call told Axios one thing: Trump was ambiguous and non-committal. Some participants left thinking he wants peace, and the other half thinking he wants to keep bombing. Not because of a translation error, not because of diplomatic nuance, because Trump genuinely does not know what he wants from this war. And Macron, who has built his entire political identity on strategic clarity, looked at that ambiguity and decided Europe could not afford to wait for Washington to figure itself out. So Macron did what any leader protecting his country's interests would do when their most powerful ally becomes unpredictable. He acted independently. He called Iranian President Pezeshkian directly. He posted publicly on X that he asked Iran to put an immediate end to all regional attacks and restore freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz. And then, according to the Financial Times, France and Italy began secret bilateral negotiations with Tehran to protect their own ships in the strait, without asking Washington's permission, without coordinating with the coalition, and without waiting for Trump to feel it in his bones. Trump found out, and the response was pure Trump. He called Macron's ceasefire claim highly fabricated fake news. He posted in capital letters that he had not reached out to Iran for peace talks in any way, shape, or form. He called Macron a nice guy, but said he doesn't get it right too often. And then, in the same breath, he told NBC News that Iran is ready to make a deal, that Washington is talking to Iran, and that the terms just aren't good enough yet. Not talking to Iran, also talking to Iran, but terms aren't good enough, both true simultaneously, from the same president, in the same news cycle. Macron says there is a ceasefire offer on the table. Trump says it is fake news. Trump says he is not negotiating. Trump says talks are happening, but the terms are bad. The Western alliance is speaking with so many contradictory voices simultaneously that the global audience has simply stopped trying to reconcile them. And Macron is not wrong about the strategic logic driving his decision, because here is the reality of what the Strait of Hormuz means for France specifically. France imports 63% of its oil from Gulf states. France's LNG supply from Qatar, now partially suspended since the war began, heats French homes and powers French industry. France's airlines depend on jet fuel that flows through a waterway Iran has declared a theater of war. France cannot wait for Trump to decide whether he is negotiating or not. France cannot wait for a coalition that has no coherent endgame to develop one. French ships, French cargo, French energy, all of it needs the strait open. And the only party that controls the strait right now is Iran, not America, not the Navy, not the IEA emergency reserves, Iran. So Macron called Iran, and Italy called Iran, and according to multiple diplomatic sources, other European nations are having the same quiet conversations behind the same closed doors, calculating the same reality. Trump's war is their crisis too, and Trump's endgame is their problem to solve because Trump does not appear to have one. Share this video immediately, because what we are watching is the real-time disintegration of the Western political consensus that has defined global security since 1945. Let's go deeper. Because this is not just about France. This is about the entire architecture of Western alliance management cracking under the weight of a war that nobody outside Washington and Jerusalem wanted, authorized, or was consulted about before it began. Italy's defense minister said the strikes violated international law. Spain called the war an extraordinary mistake. Germany's Chancellor Merz pressed Trump directly at the White House for an endgame and left without one. The UK deployed ships defensively but refuses offensive participation. Canada said it cannot rule out future involvement but has committed to nothing. And now France and Italy are in direct bilateral negotiations with the enemy of an American military operation that is still actively ongoing. In the history of the NATO alliance, this is without precedent. During the Iraq War in 2003, France and Germany opposed the invasion but did not negotiate bilaterally with Saddam Hussein while American troops were fighting. They opposed, they abstained, they protested, they did not deal directly with the other side. What France is doing now goes further. It is not opposition, it is parallel diplomacy, a separate track, a European track, one that does not include Washington and does not wait for Washington's permission. And Macron is explicitly building the political justification for it. After the G7 call, he did not stay quiet. He went to the cameras and said out loud what every European leader was thinking in private. It will be up to the President of the United States to clarify both his final objectives and the pace he intends to give to the operations. That is a French president publicly demanding that the American president explain himself to his allies, in the middle of a war, on camera, to the world. Trump's response was to insult him, nice guy, doesn't get it right too often, and then ask China, France, Japan, South Korea, and the UK to send warships to police the same strait that France is currently negotiating to protect through a separate deal with Iran. Think about the absurdity of that sequence. Trump asks France to send warships, France is simultaneously negotiating with Iran to protect its own ships without warships. Trump does not know France is doing this. France does not tell him. The Financial Times publishes it. Trump finds out on social media. And the most important military alliance in the history of the world is being managed through Truth Social posts and Financial Times leaks, while 13 Americans are dead and the Strait of Hormuz is closed. And here is the detail that makes all of this geopolitically explosive beyond anything the bilateral France-Iran talks represent on their own. Macron warned specifically and publicly against underestimating Iran's capabilities. He said Iran continues to attack several countries in the region, and its capabilities have not been reduced to zero. He explicitly contradicted Hegseth's daily declarations of obliteration, degradation, and decimation. A NATO leader stood before cameras and told the world that America's defense secretary is overstating the military damage to the enemy in an active conflict. That is not allied solidarity. That is a public dissent from the official American narrative of a war that American soldiers are still fighting. And it carries strategic weight because Macron has intelligence. France has the DGSE. France has satellite assets. France has its own sources inside the region. When Macron says Iran's capabilities have not been reduced to zero, he is not guessing. He is telling you what French intelligence is seeing, and French intelligence is telling a different story than Pete Hegseth. The fracture is real. The parallel diplomacy is real. The European track is real. And the consequences for what comes after this war, for how the world is rebuilt, for who has credibility in Tehran for the negotiations that must eventually happen, for which alliances survive intact, and which ones need years to repair, are enormous. Macron called Iran. Italy called Iran. Trump called them fake news, and the Financial Times published the receipts. Day 16, 16 days in, and America's most important European ally is conducting independent diplomacy with the enemy of an ongoing American military operation. 16 days in, and the leader of the free world cannot tell his own G7 partners whether he wants to end the war or keep fighting. 16 days in, and the Atlantic Alliance, the foundational architecture of Western security for 80 years, is being held together by a thread made of insults and Truth Social posts, while 13 Americans are dead and the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Drop everything you are thinking in the comments right now. Is Macron right to negotiate directly with Iran? Is this the end of the Western alliance as we know it? Subscribe to this channel immediately. Share this video with everyone who needs to understand what is really happening today between Washington and Paris, and we will see you in the next one.